Hey, I'm Mark, and this is Brad. How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing good, besides the fact I'm freezing cold here in Saskatchewan and stuck in this polar vortex, I'm doing good other than that. So, how are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing delicious. Thanks for asking.
Delicious?
Yeah, I'm delicious. I'm hungry for hockey.
He shoots. He scores.
You're listening to The Neutral Zone with Brad and Mark. Coming at you from the land of the free.
Hey, welcome. Hi, hello. How is everybody doing? I hope you're doing good. Yeah, we're from Saskatchewan, eh? We're stuck in a global vortex of blizzardiness, chilly, ice cold, freedom. But it sucks.
Yeah, you can't even really play hockey outside. Just gets right to your lungs. This air is so cold, right?
No, you can't even play a short 3-on-3 5-minute OT.
No, not here.
No way. Yeah, so this is Brad and Mark. We come from the land of the prairies. You're listening to the Neutral Zone. If you don't know where the prairies are, then I just don't think you ever will.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I love our province, Saskatchewan.
Yeah, you got to say it right. Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan.
You can only say it right if you live here, right?
Yeah, I can.
Or if you're from here.
You ever listen to all those celebrities who try to say Saskatchewan on TV or anything?
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
I cannot copy how they say it. It's impossible.
No.
Saskatchewan.
It's once you know how to say it right, it's hard to say it wrong.
That's right.
Yeah.
So listen, we are here to talk about hockey with you because we love to talk about hockey. So let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
Lately in hockey, something's coming up that I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, what is that again? What's coming up?
It's the trade deadline.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, it's practically like a second Christmas for some people.
Yeah.
It's a day that you got to take off, sit down with a beer or a pop or whatever you like,
Yeah.
turn on your favorite sports channel, and just follow along for the day.
Yeah, it usually turns out to be boring. There's that promise, though, that something big is going to happen. It's, like you said, it's like another Christmas, right?
Mm-hmm. The cap era has kind of taken away that excitement.
Yeah, I think so. It's tougher for teams to make trades, like true hockey trades, right?
Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's the little pieces that count, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So listen, today we're going to talk a little bit about the trades that have been going on around the league. And in the last couple weeks, we've had some pretty big ones. Coming from Toronto, they started off the trade deadline with a pretty big acquisition of Jake Muzzin from the LA Kings, in which they gave up Carl Grundstrom and the rights to Sean Durzi and a first-round draft pick for him. I think this is a great accusation from both the Toronto Maple Leafs and the LA Kings. I definitely think that the Toronto Maple Leafs, they overpaid a bit. I mean, you just gave up your first round pick for Jake Muzzin, which I think is fine. He's a 30-year-old defenseman that is definitely one of the best in the league at shutting people down. And I have no problem with what they paid, but for the Toronto Maple Leafs, that means that's the last big move I think they make.
Yeah, I would say so. Like, you said that they kind of overpaid. I think they were, it was tough for them because they were setting the price, the market price, being one of the first big trades out of the gate, right? Mm-hmm. And a guy like Jake Muzzin, I mean, he's, multiple seasons with 40-plus points. He plays a hard-nosed game. He's a tough defender, clear out the front of the net type of guy. And people were talking about how Toronto need to be tougher down low, playing down low. I think he addresses that for them, right? And he's not, he said 29 years old, I think he is, right?
Yeah, I think 29, yeah.
Yeah. So, sign for next season. You hear people talking about how he's a replacement for Gardner, because Gardner's going to be off the books, probably not coming back next year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was one of those rare trades in the NHL where it was a win-win for both teams. Like Toronto's building for right now,
Mm-hmm.
LA is building for the future, and those three pieces are really good pieces for them. Muzzin is no slouch, though.
No, and as we've already seen, because this is a trade that happened a little while ago, and he's had, I think, 4 or 5 games under his belt now with Toronto. You see that he's brought a huge physical side to the game.
Yeah.
And I think he's made everybody else realize that even though the NHL today has changed and it's gone towards the speed more or less, you still have to hit. Because I've been watching some of those Toronto games, and everybody's starting to hit now.
Yeah, there's the home stretch, right? The games get ratcheted up, physicality gets ratcheted up. Everything's just a little bit harder. Every battle's a little tougher. So a guy like Jake Muzzin can definitely help you out in that aspect.
Well, I think it's less than 30 games to go, and it's playoff time.
Yeah.
And now is the time where you got to pick up your tempo, get going, get ready for the playoffs. You got to start pushing your team, and you got to learn to keep your tempo up.
Yeah, you don't want to be going into the playoffs playing the same way you were playing at the start of the season, because everybody else is going to be ratcheting that up, like we said, and you need to be ready to go.
For teams like Tampa, it's kind of tough for them, though, right? They're way ahead of the pack.
Yeah.
They're almost not even playing for anything. They almost have that first seed in the Eastern Conference as well, first overall there, locked down. It almost seems like it. So how do you keep motivated to keep it on the gas?
I think for them personally, touching on Tampa Bay, I think they got to draw from the experience they had in previous years, where they, maybe they did that, they let up a little bit, went into the playoffs after having a really good regular season, and just, not that they flopped, they just didn't have that same intensity maybe, and couldn't carry it forward and get all the way to, to that ultimate prize, winning the Stanley Cup, right?
Mm-hmm. But now is the time of year that you got to crank it up and you got to keep your foot on the gas. I think that the Toronto Maple Leafs did a great thing for their team, getting them. He was an absolute need.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the likes of Carl Gunstrom, he's a great forward, and he's going to be a top 6 guy in the NHL someday, I believe. And giving up a first round pick, which I think looks like a very deep draft next year.
Yeah, that's what you're hearing.
Down the road, I definitely think the Kings are going to win this long term. But right now, it looks great for the Leafs. And take it as it comes, Leafs fans. It looks awesome.
Yeah, if the Leafs can win a cup this year or next, then the trade is worth it.
Absolutely.
100%. So it's obviously they know their window is right now. They're not waiting. They have enough young guys, especially forwards, that they can rely on. That Grundstrom probably wouldn't have had a huge place in their lineup in the next couple of years, and this is their best shot at a cup, so they might as well take it.
This adds size and grit, and that's what it needed.
Exactly.
What else has gone down in the NHL?
The other trade that happened last week, I believe it was Pittsburgh continued to remodel their lineup. They had a slow start to the season. They're trying to work on the chemistry. They've moved Malkin and Kessel away from each other at times this year, so they've had to really try to find the balance that won them those 2 cups a couple of years ago, right? So Pittsburgh, actually, they acquired Nick Bjugstad and Jared McCann from Florida for Derek Brassard and Riley Sheehan, plus a 2019 second-round pick and 2 fourth-round picks in 2019. I believe the second fourth-round pick was Minnesota, I think. We'd have to confirm that, but I think it was one that Pittsburgh had acquired from Minnesota. So,
yeah.
This trade, is actually a very interesting trade because you're hearing a lot of people talk about what Florida's doing here because basically Bukestad and McCann both have at least 1 year left on their contract. So Pittsburgh added about $5.5 million to their cap next year, this year and next year. And then Florida, both guys they're getting, and Sheehan and Brassard, they're both off the books next year. So it makes it interesting. They already had quite a bit of cap heading into next season. These two guys coming off, whether they want to re-sign them, they can still do that. Although you're hearing Brassard might be getting flipped.
That's
again.
pretty crazy. I always love watching those happen, eh?
It's very interesting, right? And the talk is that this could be their effort to clear cap space next season for Bobrovsky and or Panarin, right?
Yeah.
So that could be a secondary thing we're looking at here. I mean, they got two good pieces in return. Their cap's going to be cleared up a little bit next year. So, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, that'd be a huge signing by the Florida Panthers if they could bring somebody in like that in the off season.
Yeah.
As for their trade, I agree. I like Derek Brassard. He just wasn't a fit in Pittsburgh. He ended up buried on the depth chart. He's playing on the third or fourth line. That's not Derek Brassard. He was playing on a top line or second line in Ottawa when he was there.
Yeah, and he fit pretty well with Pittsburgh that first season he came over at the deadline. I think it was a couple of years ago, and they brought him over, and he was playing with I think it was Kessel and Malkin at the time, right? Sliding around, very, very versatile forward, can slide around. I'm sure that was attractive for Florida too. They have two really good centers there. They have Barkov playing top line. I think they have Trocheck's playing the second line center.
Yeah.
So Brassard can play either center or wing. That gives them a little bit of versatility with those guys, right?
Right.
So I think it's a good trade for both teams. Just very interesting underlying aspects to this trade with those guys coming off the books. What does that mean? What is Florida trying to do? And obviously for Pittsburgh, it's a little more straight up. It seems to be they're just trying to remake their lineup a little bit to find that perfect combination of guys.
Well, I think it's looked good already as Evgeny Malkin's injured, and Bukestad's been playing alongside Kessel. They've looked good. He's looked good out there. In the first couple of games, Bukestad got out there and had a couple shots on net. He looked good skating around with them. Might be a good fit long term.
I think so, and I think that you're probably seeing all that Pittsburgh's going to do. I think, their GM said that they're probably done for trades, and I was going to say this about the Muzzin trade too. All the teams involved got these trades done early on enough that they could try to integrate these guys into their lineup really quick.
Build some chemistry.
They have more time to build chemistry.
Yeah.
Not just, if they're acquired at the deadline in 2.5 weeks, you have a little less time to build that chemistry, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The other trade that's happened that I think is worth talking about happened on a couple days ago, where the New Jersey Devils traded Brian Boyle to Nashville for a second-round pick. A couple of years ago, when Brian Boyle went to the Maple Leafs, they also paid a second-round pick for him.
Was it a second?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So you can see the value that he carries as a veteran, as a body presence on the ice.
Character guy, right?
Mm-hmm. I remember watching him very closely on the Toronto Maple Leafs back when they made their playoff run with him, and it was against the Washington Capitals.
Yep.
When he went down and became injured, that changed that series for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was an amazing presence for them. Very charismatic guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure he's a lot of fun to be around. You could tell
teammate.
the boys on the ice wanted him to be there and enjoyed playing with him.
So where do you think Brian Boyle plays in Nashville? Third line?
Yeah, I think he'll be on the third line for sure.
So a second-round pick being the price for third liners at this deadline, that's a pretty hefty price. What do you think?
I think he brings the leadership that they need.
That's true. I mean, you got to take in those intangibles into account, right?
That's right. And his body presence and his playoff experience, I think, is something that really helps out with them as they go forward here.
So do you think that's why it cost a little bit more?
I think
than,
so.
than maybe you would usually see paid for a third line forward.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So
So-
it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think he's a great fit in Nashville, and they'll love having him there for the playoffs.
So the other question for you is: this New Jersey waving the white flag? Are they saying our season, even if we make the playoffs, we're probably not going to go far? Is that what this is? Do you think?
I think this is a slow cry from the Wolf that
Yeah.
this is it.
That they're waving the white
done.
flag?
They're done.
Yeah.
Sorry, Devils fans. But this is the start of the end.
And you know, if they were in the West, it might have been a different story. The West this season, it has those elite teams like Vegas, San Jose, Nashville, Winnipeg, Calgary. Those 5 teams are really battling it out for the top spots. After that, though, you have a team like Edmonton, who's I think they're about 3 points out of last place. They're only also 2 or 3 points out of the last wild card spot. So that wild card race in the West is sad.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's a bad look for the NHL. However, I mean it's definitely not
Well,
what
how
you're
would
used
it
to
be
seeing.
bad?
Because you're seeing a lot of teams. You're going to see a team possibly make it into the last wild card spot with a 500 record. That's pretty unusual.
But I think that's cool. It
That's
shows
true.
that there's balance in the NHL,
That's a
right?
good way of looking at it. The flip side.
The thing that I hate is if 2 teams end up tied for that last wildcard spot, it goes to the team with the most goals. Right? Is it the most goals or least against?
I think it's the most goals.
I think so too.
And then if they're tied,
it's least against.
yeah, I think so.
Listen, take a page out of the baseball book and play a 1-round loser goes home game.
I think the only problem with that is there's 1 extra round already compared to baseball. Baseball, there's 3 rounds, right?
1 game. I'm just talking
That's
one game.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do 1 game.
If the season ends on Sunday and playoffs start on Tuesday, you make them play that game on Monday. I'm sure there's a slot in between there where they could do something like that.
I'd imagine. I mean, they can work whatever they want to make work, right? I mean, they have so many. It seems like it's different. Obviously, with the new CBA mandated days off, there's a lot more time between games. Even on top of that CBA mandated break, there just seems to be quite a few more times where you're seeing 1 to 2 to 3 days more between games. So they could fit it in if they really wanted to. Yeah.
And they should.
Yeah, good point.
Like I said, that race is getting so close.
It is, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I was just saying I was more putting it out there as, is it a bad look on the NHL? However, you brought up a good point of it. It could just be a byproduct of parity, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're seeing a lot more teams on a night-to-night basis. Anybody could beat anybody.
I agree.
Outside of a few teams, some teams we'll talk about a little later, who should probably, like New Jersey, wave the white flag.
I just looked, and I feel kind of silly because New Jersey is way out of the playoff race already.
Yeah.
They only have 48 points, and Pittsburgh sits in the last spot with 63. New Jersey's missing Taylor Hall. Who knows when the heck he's coming back? The thing I hate about the NHL is nobody can tell us what the heck's wrong with the guy. It's a UBI or a LBI.
Yeah.
And that's all they'll tell you.
And it's funny, Calgary's coach Bill Peters was talking the other day, and they were chuckling about it. He was saying that he actually would have no problem if they actually started to mention more in depth, more detail as to what the injuries are. Mm-hmm. However, obviously that's a call that's made above the coaching level, right?
TMZ, could you do us a favor and start following around NHL players more often? Ditch those celebrities and start following some people that really matter in this life.
Yeah, do something worthwhile. Let's go. Something that we're up here in Canada. Quit ignoring us. We want to know what's going on.
Exactly. Who
Yeah.
lives next door to me?
Yeah, exactly. But
I
also-
got more NHL players that live in this town where we are
Or
than
from
celebrities do.
That's true. But look at the comparison from the West to the East. So you just mentioned that, New Jersey's got 48 points in the second last spot in the East, and Pittsburgh having the last wild card 63. then take a look at the West. The last place team, being LA, I think it is,
Yeah.
and the last wild card spot. Let's look at it.
5 points.
5 points. That's not a big separation.
Okay, so let's talk about something that really matters here.
Yeah.
Let's stick with the West.
Okay.
Who's gonna make the push? Who's gonna buy and who's gonna sell?
I think that Edmonton, which we might talk about later, like I said, they should sell. They're one of the teams that should sell. I think theoretically, out of the teams who are in that 8th and lower positions, the only team that should really buy is St. Louis. I think if you'd asked us at the beginning of the year, most people would have said that they should be sellers, and there was a time when they were saying everybody's on the block. However, that's changed a little bit, right? They went on a little bit of a run before the All-Star break. They continued to play pretty well. We'll see how they do over the next 10 games before the trade deadline. But I think they're the only team that really should try to buy in the West. The other teams that are below them, like a Vancouver or a Colorado, who have a lot of really good young pieces. Colorado maybe too should be a buyer. They're on the fence. Vancouver could theoretically be there too. What I would say though is they've started to build a really good young core, and I wouldn't sacrifice any of that for the here and now. What do you think?
I agree. I'm just quickly looking up a player here that I'm going to tell you about. But when you're mentioning St. Louis, they did look down and out.
They did.
And they looked like they started to sell off some of their guys, Periaco, Petrolangelo. There's a couple other forwards that are mentioned. Tarasenko.
Shen was the guys whose name
Shen
was
was
out
on
there.
the block. Wow, that's given up a lot.
That
You
is a
need
lot
some
of
of those
pieces.
guys to stick around and help rebuild if you're really looking towards.
Yeah, and I never got the Parayko thing.
Nah, either
Guy's
did I.
still young.
Yeah.
Still in his mid-20s, late 20s maybe. Still young, still capable of being a building block for that team, and he's, a really good defenseman, right?
Yeah.
I get Pietrangelo a little bit. He's coming up on his 30s. I think he's 29 as well. So I get wanting to maybe move him and build for the future. However, now I think, like I said, I think that's changed completely. I think that they are playing like they should be playing and could be buyers at the deadline.
Have you been following their goalie situation with a fella named Jordan Binnington at all?
I haven't, no. I know that he'd kind of taken over a little bit for Jake Allen, or at least, had started to share some of the load with him.
Yeah. He's been playing a lot more often lately.
Has he?
Yeah. He started the last 2 games. We're going back to the 7th against Tampa Bay and the 5th against Florida.
Okay.
The guy's been playing really good hockey for him. He's got 8 wins, 1 loss, 2 shutouts, a goals against of 1.7, and a save percentage of 0.931.
Holy cow, that's good for a young guy, right?
No.
Or for a new,
Absolutely.
He's a rookie, is he not?
Incredible. Just to go along with Hart, right?
Yeah, Hart and Philly.
From Philadelphia.
And there's an eerie comparison there between how the seasons have gone for both those teams. Both with young goalies now coming on in Hart and Binnington. Both had terrible starts to the season and both picked it up kind of around the same time leading into the All-Star break. So I just thought that was kind of funny. It's a very, very weird, they're comparable to how their seasons have gone, right?
Okay. This is what the problem with St. Louis is. And this is what the problem was in the beginning of the year is the goaltending.
Yeah.
So I bring up this kid's name is because he's kind of saving that team right now. They're sitting in that last wild card spot.
Yeah.
Do you St. Louis, should you not still be looking for a goaltender, or do you think that you can rely on Binnington?
I think that it's much like the scenario in Calgary. Although even actually a little bit more, because Calgary's guys are even a little more seasoned. And Smith there has been playing much better lately, it seems. Because there's been lots of talk out of Calgary, them being a contender, being an elite, which who saw that coming? We might talk about that later too.
Right.
But I think it's a lot like there, where I don't think it'll hurt to add a veteran guy like a Howard or a Mrazek or someone like that who might be available.
Talbot,
well,
I thought about Talbot.
Talbot, I
because-
think, might be mentally, he needs another half a season to kind of maybe get himself back mentally from all the ups and downs he's gone through. I don't know. What do you think about Talbot?
I think if you just give him a fresh start now, and I think he's begging for it.
Yeah.
I think that the brass in Edmonton. Oh man, I could talk about what's happening to Edmonton all night long.
Yeah, it's like I
It's
said,
a tough
something we
one
might
to
touch on later.
stay away from because I want to really talk about them, but I want to do it later.
Yeah.
But I think a guy like Talbot, God, he was a good goalie in New York, and
Hey,
he did good when the first season
year,
of Edmonton.
yeah.
But the guy can't handle the pressure of the hockey in Canada, maybe, because we've got to him, and we in Canada we get to these hockey players' heads.
Some guys don't like playing in Canadian markets.
Absolutely not.
It's a tough, especially one where you have the best, arguably the best player on the planet.
Yeah.
There's pressure to make it count right now. So I mean, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Canada, our cities are crazy for hockey.
Yeah.
And not that they're not crazy down in the States either, but this is how our media goes, and I don't know exactly how it is in the States. But when your team's winning, they're all over you. You're awesome.
Yeah.
You're the gods of that city. And then you lose one game, and things start to go a little sour. And then you lose a second game, and things start to get rotten. And then you lose a third and a fourth, and my God, look out. Somebody's got to get fired or traded.
Yeah. And we've already seen both the GM and coach fired this season.
Yeah. So when I think of Talbot, I think he's a great goaltender. He just needs to get the heck out of there. And once he does,
Breath of fresh air for him, eh?
sigh of relief.
Yeah.
And then he can focus on playing hockey.
Well, I mean, their beat writer for Sportsnet, Mark Spector, as much as said that after about 2-3 weeks ago, he said the toxicity around that team is higher than he's ever seen it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's saying something for Edmonton, where there's been, I mean, it's been the decade of darkness there. It's how many rebuilds. I mean, the fans are talking about this on a constant basis if you, you pay attention in Edmonton. And, with the firing of Chiarelli, a lot of people were thinking, oh, okay, this is a fresh start. However, there's a lot of fans there who think the rumors of the old boys club still running stuff. Like I said, again, we can save this for later, but this is, who knows, getting him out of there, like you said, might be just the thing he needs. Get him onto a contending team or onto a team where he's just the backup.
Yeah, but you make a good point too. He might need that breath of fresh air and to sit back and relax a little and try to get back into it.
Find his
maybe
form.
he doesn't jump right back in. And also, let's not jump to a conclusion, but he hasn't exactly been a starting goaltender for that long either. So maybe he just wasn't cut out for it.
Maybe it was a flash in the pan.
Well, you never know.
Yeah,
He
it could
finally
be.
got a chance, and he flourished in it, but he just couldn't keep that momentum going.
Well, and everybody in Edmonton that season where they went to the playoffs, went into the second round, I mean, everybody played out of their minds, right? They all had career years. So that could have been it. I mean, who knows? You won't know until you see him play somewhere else if that in fact happens.
And let's just say that every goaltender in the NHL is a great goaltender. The goaltending position is one of the hardest to guess as to where it's going. It's really hard to track.
They're different
and
animals.
pick out a guy who really stands out. A few years ago, the Toronto Maple Leafs had two goaltenders, Justin Pogge and Tuukka Rask. They had the chance to trade one or the other. The other team said, well, you give us Justin Pogge or you give us Tuukka Rask. And the Maple Leafs were sure that Justin Pogge was the next Martin Brodeur.
I think everybody thought that.
Well,
Coming off that big
so did
gold
I.
medal win with
Yep.
Canada.
and Tuukka Rask was just there. He was in the shadow.
He was a great goalie.
And he was still a great goalie.
Yeah.
So they chose to trade Tuukka Rask to none other than the Boston Bruins. We all know that.
Yeah, we know how that went. So won a cup.
And how many did Justin Pogge win?
I don't think he even played that many games.
Oh, like you mean seasons or?
I think Tuukka Rask might have played more games in the playoffs the year they won the cup than Pogge played in the NHL completely.
Oh, well,
And that's not to bash on Pogge.
No.
It's just, it's a tough position.
okay, it's a very tough position. So let's not kid ourselves. Every goaltender who makes it into an NHL uniform is a great goaltender.
Exactly.
Okay, it's just very tough. If we take a look up to the Eastern Conference, there's a couple teams who are buyers, and a couple teams that should be sellers already.
Yeah.
One of them is the Philadelphia Flyers. And it's a team that I'm watching really closely because the GM's come out and said that everybody is on the block minus Giroux.
But was that before they went on their run, though?
It was.
I think
but
it
what
was
do you
a
consider
little-
a run?
I mean, how far out of the playoffs are they, right?
Well, I mean, they're sitting 4 points back right now.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, sorry. 8 points.
8 points back?
Mm-hmm.
They have any games in hand? I'm looking here too with you.
Maybe a little bit. But look, okay,
Yeah.
everybody sees that they've gone on a tear lately. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. Okay, and then they took a loss the other night to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, "Oh, that's great." But if you look at before that, they lost like 6 or 7 in a row. So they kind of balanced themselves out.
Yeah, they're definitely a bubble team. So I think that, like we said before, that the next 10 games or however many games are left for them before the trade deadline is really going to be the telltale of what they should do. I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to move anybody until the last minute if they are, because they're not going
Agree.
to know until then
Yeah.
whether they're buyers or sellers.
Yeah, I think the trade deadline is on the let's see, the 26th of February. So that still gives us a little bit of time before then. And they're 8 points. That's tough. That's really tough.
With only-
but you're right.
With only
They're-
30 games left, yeah.
They're going on a streak. So you never know.
I think the only teams that I would say in the East that you would consider for sure sellers is everybody below Philly. Even though they're only, like, for example, New York's only 1 point behind them. Florida's only 3 points. Florida might be another bubble team that now that Trocheck is back and they have some depth and added, a couple guys in Brassard I think will fit well there. They too could possibly go on a run and challenge for one of those wild card spots. I would say the other 4 teams, though, New York, Detroit, Jersey, and Ottawa, would be the definite sellers coming up, for the trade deadline out of the East.
So sticking with Philadelphia, I have to say this name, but Wayne Simmons
Yeah.
is, I think, probably one of the most sought after guys on the block.
Definitely one of the
he
bigger
is.
names.
He could go anywhere. I've heard teams like Tampa Bay wanting to hook up with him. And it's Tampa Bay Lightning,
Which is a scary proposition.
which is a very scary position.
Yeah.
The team is absolutely dominating the East standings. They're 39 wins and only 11 losses. That's crazy. They have 82 points already. I think if they went about 500 the rest of the way, they could still end up with 109 or 10 points or something like that, I figured out, which is still amazing. And there's no way that they're a 500 team on the way out here. So who knows where they're going to stop. But a team like Tampa Bay is looking at acquiring a player like Wayne Simmons.
Yeah.
That, I think, just speaks volumes on how much this player can impact teams. From his size, he's, I think, in the last 5 years or something like that, ridiculous, they broke it down, they say that he's the best power play scorer.
Yeah, because he parks himself in front of the net there, right? He's basically Matthew Tkachuk out of Calgary is another guy. You compare those guys to some of the guys in Detroit, because Detroit used to be known for that, right? They had 2 or 3 guys who they'd park in front of the net on power plays, and it was almost impossible to stop, whether it be a tip in or garbage goal where they're scoring on the rebound. Some of the best guys at it for sure. So, do you want to jump into our list? We prepared a list for everybody today, right?
Yeah, well, let's talk about Wayne Simmons
Yeah, we
here.
could start off with him. Yeah, so we prepared a list of guys that we think are going to be on the move, and we could talk a bit. Wayne Simmons being the first one, yeah.
Well, he's the tough, gritty guy that everyone wants.
Yeah.
And I think he's the guy you need. You got other teams that, if you're in the West and you end up facing off against the Winnipeg Jets,
Yeah.
You gotta face off against Big Buff the Stuff.
And who's going to take Bufflin on?
I love that picture of him in Nashville. It's Nashville, right?
I think
and
it was.
and he's manhandling the two guys at
Yeah.
once in the playoffs.
It was Nashville, yeah.
You can't. You gotta have something to match up against that.
You do. And I don't know who, I mean, outside of a few guys like Ryan Reeves or maybe a Tom Wilson in Washington, I don't know guys who can. And actually, a funny story about Bufflin. This season, I was watching a game between Winnipeg and Calgary. And they'd shot the puck in. Calgary's goalie, David Riddick, had frozen the puck. Whistle had just gone. Bufflin came in, knowing what he was doing. But he came in and poked at Riddick's glove. And right away, Riddick got up, mad, just hot. And he turned around to charge after whoever just poked his glove. And he looked and saw it was Bufflin. Turned right back around, skated back to his crease, right? So that's just an example of, I mean, there's not a lot of guys who are going to be able to take on Buffalo. So, those top teams in the West, you're right. They need to, and Calgary would be a perfect example of maybe a team that needs a player like Wayne Simmons or another player we'll talk about in a little bit, Michael Furland, to challenge those big guys, right?
Well, everybody needs a player like Wayne Simmons. Michael Furland. What are you going to talk about him, Brad? Because you just mentioned his name, so let's go there.
Yeah, Michael Furland, another player who's cut from the same cloth as Wayne Simmons. Not as successful offensively in the past. However, he's still a guy who can score goals. He's was playing on the top line off and on with Teravainen and Aho there in Carolina. Mm-hmm. But he also brings that tough, gritty, physical edge. He's a guy, he broke into the league in the playoffs back in, I think it was 2015 in that series against Vancouver. And, he spent the whole series just getting under the skin of Vancouver. And I think that's part of what helped them win that series. When no one expected them to win it, you had guys like Furland and England, who's in Vegas now, but he was on that team. Just tough guys who were able to be physical, like we talked about earlier, right?
Right. No, I agree. He's a very physical guy that a lot of teams are looking for. Somebody like the Toronto Maple Leafs could use a guy like Michael Furland. Muzzin's brought a great body presence there.
Yeah.
But they could definitely use more grit there.
Yeah.
Even a team like, say, the New York Islanders, who I believe Furland's contract expires at the end of this year.
It does, yeah. He's a free agent.
A team like the New York Islanders, that could be a good fit for them too.
Could be. Yeah, teams that won't have the cap next season, but have the cap this season to fit him. Because Furland, I think he's making a little over $2 million, or a little between 2 and 3, I think, this year. Mm-hmm. Next year, he's probably going to be asking for somewhere between 3 and 4, maybe 4.5. Mm-hmm. So, it'll be tough to fit him into the cap for some of these teams next season. Mm-hmm. For a playoff run, though, he might be that perfect player to fit in, right? And me personally, I think there's going to be, both in the Central and Pacific divisions, I think there's going to be an arms race at this deadline. Because I think you're going to see those top 4 or 5 teams trying to make sure they load up and have players to compete with each other. So I think you're going to see some of those teams. Like, I think another team that could go for Simmons or Furland would be Vegas.
Yeah, I agree.
They have the pieces to do it. We talked about this a little bit off air before, but imagine Vegas throwing Wayne Simmons over the boards on line 3 or line 2 or whatever, and then the very next line throwing Ryan Reeves over the boards.
Well, I think
that's a pretty tough 1-2 to compete with, right?
I
in
agree.
terms of grit and being tough.
And I think that the Vegas Knights have obviously come down from their fantasy story last year a little bit. And they're not scoring like they did last year, right? William Karlsson, he's not on the pace to score 45 goals or whatever he did last year.
Although they're heating up a little bit.
They're heating up a little bit, but
not on the same pace. Definitely not.
I think you gotta look and understand that you need some depth up front, and not only depth, but somebody can score.
Yeah,
Furland definitely can score. He's not your prolific guy, but the guy's got 14 goals this year, 14 assists. He's got 28 points in 45 games. That's not that bad yet, really.
That's still
for what
pretty good,
you can get on your third line. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
and that's kind of where they need to fit in somebody a little bit as well. I think a team like that, just staying with the Vegas Knights there, How about going after a player like Duchesne or something?
Yeah, he's not on our board for who we think is going to move. Although I think they're going to determine that over the next week and a half. I think they're aggressively trying to sign him right now. There's very little coming out from Ottawa right now as to what's going on, but I think they're trying to sign Duchesne and Stone. If they can't, though, the talk to has been that Dzingel's going to move, and that's another guy who's on our board. We'll talk about in a little bit. I think, though, that if they can't get Duchesne signed in the next week, that he might be the guy that they move instead. So definitely a piece that's possible, although I think Ottawa would prefer to keep him. We'll see what happens there, though.
They would, but I think they got some trouble in Ottawa, and it's not just on the team. It's everything around there, from the rink to the locations to getting new rinks to owners and player personnel. And
yeah, it's not as bad as necessarily Edmonton for the team on the ice.
Mm-hmm. Here's a guy who was on our list. Sorry,
Yeah,
here's a guy who's on our list that since we're talking about Ottawa and whether they're going to move guys or not. And I haven't heard any real news about this guy in the last couple of weeks, but I got I got excited when I heard this name because I think he's a great player, and if Ottawa is willing to move on from him, then I think a lot of teams would be jumping at it to get this guy and also to re-sign him, and that's Ryan Dzingel.
Yeah, we just talked about there. Yeah,
Yeah, he's a 26-year-old guy.
yeah,
He's gonna have over 30 goals this year.
yeah. And I think, like I said, that depends on whether they move Duchesne and whether they can re-sign him. And if they re-sign Duchesne, I think Dzingel moves for sure.
Well, Dzingel had a lot of frustration with the team, and he was saying kind of not outright, but it was sounded like he was asking for a trade almost.
Yeah, that could just be, again, an indication of some of the deeper problems that have been going on in Ottawa. I mean, you had the situation with Hoffman and Carlson before both of them were moved. You wonder how much of an effect that's still having on that dressing room. You have the Uber incident that happened earlier in the season. I mean, there's just been so many negatives around that team that it's almost like we talked about with Talbot earlier. Our guys just looking for a new start and a breath of fresh air that can help them, rejuvenate their career a little bit. I mean, Dzingel's having a good season still already, so
frustration can build up for players like that, and then you get to a point and just say, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore. Whatever you guys do next year, fine, but I'm not going to be here.
Yeah. As for Dzingel, though, so he is on our board. We think he's going to move. What do you think a team's getting if they were to trade for Dzingel? What type of player is he to you?
He's a scorer.
Yeah.
If you're going to trade for him, I always link somebody like Pittsburgh Penguins to grabbing something like this. But if they got Bugstead now I've kind of shaded him off my list. I always kind of come back around to some of those teams at the top who could still use goal scoring help. And the New York Islanders is a team that needs help scoring. They have a lockdown game. They're great defensively, and their goaltending's playing really well. But I think a team like the New York Islanders could use them. Maybe if Montreal says pretty please to Ottawa, they could ship him over there. And I think that's also a good move for them. He fits in well with their youth and is someone who's going to be looking for a new contract next year. Maybe they can get it there. Carolina is also another team that's looking for scoring. And if they're looking for something long-term and feel like he'll fit in there, I definitely think that he could go to Carolina as well.
Yeah.
Carolina's around that cusp of pushing in here.
They're another
but if it's
team,
a player you really like and you want to sign them in the off season, just go out and get them now.
Well, and we're talking about Carolina. We talked about the fact that Ferland could be on the move for them. That could be a piece that they're moving because of the contract situation. What we haven't talked about yet, we can move on to another guy on our board too. Brett Pesce, out of Carolina, is on our board. He's one of the defensemen we think will move. There's been a lot of talk about Dougie Hamilton out of Carolina moving. However, you and I were kind of talking about it, and I don't know if he'll be the guy that'll move. I think that Pesce might be the guy that would actually move because of certain circumstances, contract wise, things. He's a little bit cheaper, I think, than Dougie Hamilton is, right?
Yeah.
Both right shot defensemen, that valuable piece that a lot of teams are looking for.
Yeah.
So I think that Ottawa and Carolina could be a good match, right? Pesci's still young. It could be another piece that they add to their core in Ottawa. And like you said, Carolina's looking for some scoring to go along with the guys they have there, like Aho and Teravainen and Furland if he stays. Justin Williams, who seems to be having, I don't know how the guy still keeps doing it, but he's having a good season, but he's going to be like 37, 38 now, right? So they need one or two more pieces, and Dzingel might be it, and Brett Pesce might be a piece that could go back the other way. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. When I think of Hamilton, I think if you're the Carolina, you have to feel a little sour about that trade with Carolina. Or with Calgary, sorry. So, do you really want to move on already and say no, this didn't work? Look, Dougie Hamilton is a great defenseman. He shoots the puck a lot.
Yeah, his underlying numbers are still good this season.
He's
his,
a great
Corsi 4 and everything.
Yeah, he's a great offensive defenseman. I just don't think if you're Carolina, don't give up yet.
Yeah,
but I hear Brett Pesce's name getting tossed around.
Yeah.
And they do have a surplus of right-hand shot defensemen. And Pesce is a guy that I don't know if they want to have there anymore. I think they have other guys they want to fill in and bring up. And I also think that they find that he carries the most value right now. So I think this is a good time to get rid of him from.
Yeah, I think you hit on it there. I think that the optics of that trade with Calgary in the offseason are already bad enough. Imagine dealing Dougie Hamilton and maybe not getting. I mean, Calgary obviously has ran away with that trade for the most part. The players Hanifin, one of the big things that a lot of Calgary fans were talking about at the time is they thought they were giving up way more offense from the back end by getting Hanifin and Hamilton, but Hanifin's actually been outscoring Hamilton this season. And then you talk about Elias Lindholm up front. I mean, it's not even close, right? I mean, Elias, who saw Elias Lindholm having the season he was going to have, but it's put him with the right players and Gaudreau and Monahan, and look what he's doing. I mean, I think he's got 60 points now.
Yeah.
He's blowing, or 62 points, something like that. So
what was his last high? 40?
45.
45 points.
So, I mean, he's blowing by his career highs in goals, points, and assists, right? So
he was definitely a high draft pick.
Yeah. Fifth overall, I think.
Was he fifth?
He was fifth overall. Yeah, because he went a pick before Monahan.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the joke, because they went in the same draft. I think Calgary's added about 5 or 6 guys from that first round through trades over the last few years. But Monahan and Lindholm went 1 and 2 right after each other, like 5 and 6, I should say, right? So he's a high pick. Both him and Hanifin, I think, were fifth overalls in the respective years that were drafted. So, I think you're 100% right that the optics of trading Hamilton now would, especially with if Furland, who's the other NHL piece that came over, is going to go, it'd be tough to justify to the fans, that's for sure.
Hamilton could be a great piece moving forward. And if you're looking for scoring help, I mean, I guess you're just going to have to put some offers out there and see who brings back the most.
Yeah.
To me, I think it's Brett Pesce. I think the NHL is starting to open up their eyes a little bit and realize that you just can't have six offensively gifted defensemen back there, and that you need to have some that are going to shut it down as well.
Yeah, and you got a log jam of right shot defensemen, right? I mean, they got
which is a high value in the NHL.
Exactly, and I think the only player, I mean, Falk's another guy who can move there. I think the only defenseman there that they wouldn't move is Slavin. I think he's their cornerstone on defense.
Yeah, he's looking really good.
Again, like for the reasons we talked about, I don't think we'll see Hamilton move either. So I think it's either Pesce or Falk. Although time will tell as to it'll be one of those guys. I think they'd be foolish not to trade one for some scoring help.
Yeah. What do you think about the situation in Edmonton? I heard people saying that their first round picks gotta be on the block right now. Trade that first round pick and bring back some assets and start your rebuild and get going. And
I think that sentence itself answers it. It's very counterproductive to trade your first if you're trying to restart another rebuild. You know, I think it's a terrible idea to trade your first.
Does somebody honestly think? Maybe it's just a little bit of bias coming out of me or something. I don't hate the Oilers. I actually really like to watch them.
It's a tough situation.
I've always liked to watch the Oilers growing up in Canada. They've been one of my favorite teams to watch. But you just fired your GM. Earlier in the year, you fired your coach. Who there knows what the heck's going on?
Well, you know, this is another thing you and I have talked about and given each other our opinion on off the air, that I think the perfect example of how bad it could be there is the Koskinen deal. We talked about this when it happened a few weeks ago, that one of two things happened. Mm-hmm. Either one, Chiarelli, less than 24 hours before he was fired, either were so asleep at the wheel in the management level that they let this guy make a trade 24 hours before he was fired. Mm-hmm. Or for some fans in Edmonton, this might even be a worst case scenario, a worse scenario than the fact that Chiarelli did it. But the person who decided that it was a good idea to sign a guy in Koskinen who had about 31 games, I think, in the NHL level at that time, decided it was a good idea to sign him to $4.5 million for 3 years. So if Chiarelli didn't do it, the person who decided it was a good idea is still in that organization. So that might even be scarier than them having let Chiarelli do it 24 hours before he was fired. Now, we saw the presser with Bob Nicholson, their president, after he said, in fact, it was a group decision. So we know it wasn't the fact that Chiarelli. So I don't know, which is scarier. Is it the fact that they thought somebody is still there that thought that was a good idea?
I heard, I don't know the truth behind this, but I heard that it wasn't the Koskinen deal that ended it for him. It was the fact that he was looking at the next day or whatever at trading a key piece to their future core there, and he wanted to trade away Jesse Puljujarvi and their first. For what? I don't know. Nobody knows. But had he done that,
it's probably the reason he's gone.
That's a step backwards.
Yeah.
And I think the upper brass saw what he was trying to do, and they said, stop. Okay? That's enough.
Very well could have been.
I don't have a list of his trades in front of me, but when I saw him go across the board online the other day, I thought, yikes.
It wasn't bad. Good. It was a bad track record. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think he, made a couple decent trades at the start. Then he made one bad trade and then another, and it just kind of compounded on top of itself. I mean, when you trade Jordan Eberle, who I get it, lots of players have warts in their game, that are their blemishes. Mm-hmm. He has blemishes, although he was still a 60-point guy. Mm-hmm. You trade him for Ryan Strome, who then you trade for Spooner,
who then you trade waived, for a waiver
pick. So
you don't get a pick.
We were talking about optics of the Calgary-Carolina trade. I mean, the optics in Edmonton are terrible, and like we talked about earlier, people close to the team are saying that the toxicity in that dressing room and in the organization are at an all-time high. So
you can see it on McDavid's face in the All-Star game when they asked him about the team and how they're doing and what they need to do to turn it around. McDavid was just like gritting his teeth, trying to hold it back, and because he's a great Canadian boy, he kept his composure and said, I think I'll answer that at a different time. I'm just here to enjoy the All-Star festivities. We'll talk about that later.
And I shouldn't laugh because, I mean, you feel bad for the guy. Regardless of what team you cheer for, you got to feel bad for a player who's committed his immediate future to a team, and that team has just basically went over a cliff since that point, right? So, yeah, I saw that too, and it was...
They're not the only ones going through that, though, right now. I mean, I don't want to get talking about them. The Anaheim Ducks, they're doing the same thing. Listening to an interview with Ryan Getzlaf this morning, and they say, yeah, we want to get this going. We want to get it in our heads. Of course, it's a distraction, Everybody's watching, listening,
Yeah, especially in today's information age where everything is right in your face with social media and all
Right.
that. I mean, it's tough to not hear what the outside is saying, right?
And then just going back to the Edmonton Oilers, because I'm not done wanting to talk about them. But the Edmonton Oilers, do you trade your first round pick? No.
No,
do you
that's a
trade
terrible
anything?
idea.
Well, I think you can trade Cam Talbot because he's not coming back. So if you can get anything for him, give it.
Yeah.
Get it.
He'd be the only piece I think I would move.
Other
Just
than
this
that-
guy's opinion.
Maybe if somebody wants Lucic.
That'd be a tough trade. You're gonna have to retain quite a bit of salary, I think.
Maybe they can get Eli Kovalchuk. I don't know.
I don't even think LA makes that trade.
I think Eli Kovalchuk asks for a trade to a contender.
You could see it.
Just my thing.
Yeah, I think in LA, I mean, you got a few other guys there. Probably like Carter might move.
Yeah.
Toffoli is another name I've heard from them that might move. So there's some other pieces. I mean, they're not on our board, but
There's
the
a
guys who can move.
defenseman there as well. I've been hearing. Who's the other defenseman there in LA?
Martinez.
Yeah, Martinez.
Yeah,
I've
Martinez is
also
the guy
heard
that
of
could
Alec,
move.
Alec Martinez.
I think the only
scored
guys
as
who won't move, who are still relatively young enough to go through a rebuild, would be their top two guys in Kopitar and Doughty. I think Quick could move, although that would be a tough ad for anybody because the price to acquire him plus fitness cap hit in would be tough.
well. And Rory's saying if anybody's probably looking for a goaltender at the deadline, it's probably just for a backup.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at better goaltenders, cheaper
For sure.
goaltenders on the market
Yeah.
than him. He'll be somebody who probably moves in the offseason if they want to move in a different direction.
So another guy that's on our list we haven't got to talk to about yet, but Gustav Nyquist out of Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Think he's going to move?
Yeah, I do. I totally think that Gustav Nyquist is going to move. He's a great scoring winger. He's come to an end of his time in Detroit, I think.
I think so.
Even though he looks still good, he's almost a point per game guy. I think in the last 54-ish games, probably something like 45, 46 points or something like that now.
Yeah, he's still putting up a good amount of points.
He's still putting up good points. He shows good hands, right?
I just don't think he
can
fits.
be a complementary player to a lot of teams out there.
Yeah, I just don't
I'd
think he
say-
fits with their core. I mean, they got young guys like Larkin and Athanasiou.
Kachuk.
Yeah, and Mantha. Sorry, who?
Or, sorry, scratch that.
You're thinking from Ottawa there.
Yeah.
But Mantha. So, I mean, those, a few young guys. And I just think that Nyquist is still a good player.
Bertuzzi. Sorry, I
Bertuzzi's
was
another
thinking
young guy. Yeah.
Bertuzzi.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree. I think he's going to be traded and he'd fit in perfectly. Again, another guy who could, anybody looking for some depth scoring, a guy who he doesn't have to play on your top line, right? He can play on the second, third line and still give you some depth scoring. So I think a team, again, and we're going to talk, anytime you hear us talking about these guys, it's going to be a lot of the same teams that are looking at them. So I think a team like Winnipeg might look at him if they could fit him in.
They need a centerman in Winnipeg.
They do. And that's
Good
another guy maybe
Friday.
we'll talk about after this that from New York. Hayes might be a better fit for them, right? So,
Hayes would be a great fit
yeah.
for Winnipeg.
In terms of Nyquist, though, I think Calgary might be a destination for him because, I mean, they're looking for some depth guys. I mean, they have their four-headed monster there in the top line, and then Matthew Tkachuk, all over 55 points, I think, this season, with Goudreau leading the way. But adding a guy like Nyquist to give a little bit more depth scoring will be a good piece for them. Vegas, again, another. I mean, they're going to be in on everybody.
Don't count Dallas out.
Dallas,
because they're
that's
kind
true.
of sitting there and they need some depth, scoring, defense, a little bit of
A
everything.
little bit of everything, yeah. They could be very active.
Yeah, exactly. Even a team like Minnesota who just lost their captain Koivu to a knee
Koivu, yeah.
injury for the rest of the year. That's a team now that'll also be probably trying to make a
Acquisition, yeah, definitely. I mean, they could be another bubble team where the next 5 to 10 games tells them if they're going to be buyers or sellers, right?
What about Vancouver?
Again, like I said to you earlier, I think they could, but I wouldn't be moving any future pieces if I could help it. Like, I think that they're close in terms of where they are with the rebuild. I think they're ahead of Edmonton already.
Is Edler still injured?
Edler's
right?
still injured.
Yeah.
I wouldn't sell my draft pick because, like you said earlier, I think this draft coming up, we've heard, is going to be a deep draft. So if they were able to add one more young player to...
They got to keep their first round pick.
Yeah.
So this isn't a team that's going to go trading any picks right now. They're doing something really good right now.
Yeah.
In the next 5 years, it's
They're
going
gonna
to
be
be
a
pretty
contender.
positive there.
Yeah.
keep your picks and build that pool up.
Exactly.
Especially when they're talking about the Oilers there as well. They got to build up their draft pool as well.
Yeah. So the other guy we just talked about too, Kevin Hayes. Like you said, I think he would fit well in a team like Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
You know, moving on from Nyquist, I think we talked about him enough. But Hayes, I think. What do you think? I think what would appeal to me if I was Winnipeg about him is Laine's having an off year, right? He's having an up and down year. Ehlers has been injured, so that depth has been tested a little bit. Having a guy who's a good setup guy like Kevin Hayes on line at center with Laine, and that would be a pretty nice fit.
Well, let's think about this. What is Laine good for?
Scoring goals.
He's good for scoring goals.
Yeah.
What a hell of a shot that guy's got. What does he need? Somebody's going to get the puck.
Yeah.
Kevin Hayes fits that bill. 6'5". Okay.
Yeah.
216 pounds.
Big body.
He's a big body. He goes into the corners. He can win the battles for the pucks. He's been in 5 NHL seasons now, and I don't think he's hit his full potential right now. He's a guy who's, I think, going to definitely pull a lot of money next year in the free agency.
Yeah, UFA.
And if he's going to go to a team and help them win right now, I think if he went to Winnipeg, that would push him over the top. I would definitely be leaning hard to put Winnipeg as my favorite to win the cup.
Yeah, he could be that Stastny piece for him, right?
They need that Stastny piece
Yeah,
again.
another piece like that they can just add.
Hey, and that's what I was going to say, is Laine is the guy who just might boost Laine, or Hayes will be that guy to boost Laine to get him going. Feed him the puck in front of the net.
Yeah.
He really needs that, and I think if he could start scoring again and start skating. He's got some really bad numbers lately, though, from his back checking to his puck possession time, shooting, everything.
He's still
Just
learning,
down.
right? He's still learning as a young guy. And, you know, that poses an interesting question that I was talking about with another guy the other day. That does this mean, like, if Laine continues on this path, does that mean that Matthew Tkachuk is the second best player out of that draft?
Yeah.
And it's closer than it probably was at the time of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so we'll see how it plays out. Obviously, a lot of time left in these guys' careers.
We'll talk about that later. That's a good episode to do.
Yeah, for sure. So
One last name
yeah, and this is
that
the
we're going to mention.
this is
and
the big ticket. I think.
This is, because
Yeah.
you told me this is the guy you want on your list, and I raised my eyebrows. This is not a name that nobody's going to heard of, but to anybody who really truly thinks he's going to move, because the NHL since the cap era, we've never seen this big of a move at the deadline. But for some reason, Brad thinks this guy's
Yeah, I really think that Artemi Panarin's going to move. And I don't know if did you see the news came out today that he just fired his agent and hired the same agent as Bobrovsky.
Yeah, really.
So I don't know what that means. I mean, Bobrovsky's had a little bit more of a rocky relationship with the Blue Jackets. So I don't know if Panarin's preparing himself for a battle contract-wise with them. So I honestly think that he could be the big name that moves. Now, again, this could be for another episode, whether that's a good idea. I don't think we've seen a lot of the Stanley Cup champions the last few years add big names. It's been more depth pieces. So whether it's a good idea or not, that's maybe an argument for another day. I do think, though, that Panarin's going to move. I think it depends how they do on the next 5 to 10 games again, another one of those teams. That might be a cop-out by me, but...
No cop-outs.
No cop-outs?
You said he's going to get traded, and that's what's going to happen.
All right, he's getting traded.
Okay, listen, over the last 10 games, though, probably, they've been on a bit of a slide and have recently kind of bounced back with a couple wins against Colorado and Arizona. They've been having troubles, and I think this is maybe starting to get a bit to the team.
Yeah.
And maybe they're going to realize right away that they're not going to make the playoffs.
And if you're not going to make the playoffs after a couple years of... I think they've made it a couple years in a row, or at least they did last year. I don't think you can lose Panarin for nothing. I just don't think you can. So I think if they're going to wave the white flag too, you got to trade Panarin.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think he's going to move. And I think there's a few teams West and East that could add him. Now, the team that I think is most likely is another, talking about this team again, is Carolina.
Carolina is the one team that can bounce them out of the playoffs, okay? They're in the same division.
Exactly.
And Carolina has 1 point less than them right now.
Yeah.
So that's how close it is. And with Carolina coming on a lot hotter than Columbus is right now, they could bump them out, and that gap could get a little too big for Columbus to overcome.
Yeah.
I think if Columbus falls into a little bit of a gap, it's going to become a huge crater real fast. Bobrovsky seems to be a bit of a troublemaker.
And I think he's gone at the end of the season.
Oh, absolutely.
Regardless, or unless they trade him, I think he's gone as a free agent. That you don't usually see those trades in division, like divisional rivals trading with each other. Although you do sometimes. I think the reason I say Carolina, despite the fact they're in the same division, is because I think it's a team that could fit him under their cap. Have you seen how much money Carolina has on their cap available for deadline cap space?
No.
It's like $75 million.
How does that even work?
Because it's prorated, right?
Okay.
So, that's wild. They theoretically could add anybody that they wanted at the deadline.
Wow.
And for that same
Sky's
reason,
the limit.
Yeah, for that same reason, the other team I think would be in on him is Nashville, because Nashville has about $30 million in deadline cap space.
Hey, would you be saying you're out of the playoffs if you turned around and traded Panarin
You'd be
and
waving,
Bobrovsky
you'd be waving
to
the white
Carolina?
flag. Yeah, you're saying it's over.
Oh, I would love to see the first game between those two teams.
If they traded him.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
Well, Carolina's a pretty feisty team. I watched their games against Calgary here coming out of the break, before the All-Star break and then one after. And they got physical. So, it could be an interesting... Imagine if they traded Panarin to Carolina and they both made the playoffs somehow and faced each other. That'd be quite the series, right?
That'd be good.
Yeah. Not likely to happen, but you never know.
Well, I said this about 2 weeks ago when you first mentioned that you thought Panarin was going to get moved. And I just shook my head, rolled my eyes, because it doesn't happen in the NHL now.
It doesn't.
But every day that goes by, I kind of start to sway my mind towards your favor.
Yeah.
Because it's getting kind of ugly. And, hey, take a page and learn from what happened to the New York Islanders. They lost Tavares, and they even asked him when the trade deadline came up whether he thought he'd be resigning. And he seemed undecided, but thought he would stay there.
And I think his signing...
That's what he said to them. And then he said, no.
And Tavares' signing in Toronto changed the landscape completely, in my opinion. I think that you hadn't seen a big name in the NHL, in my memory, that did that. That waited out to UFA and then signed with a different team. At least you don't see it very often, right? It was fairly unprecedented, and I think it's led to a lot of new things. We didn't talk about this, but Matthews' contract has been another one of those things where Austin Matthews just signed a contract that he didn't sign for max years. So you're seeing the landscape of how players are dealing with teams and vice versa. That is a new approach, and Tavares opened a floodgate, I think, for players like Panarin, who saying, it's okay to move to another team, right? So,
well, it's going to be interesting, and I hope that if I take the day off work, and I probably will, even though I say I don't want it right now, I probably will, because I still love to sit down, and that would make it an exciting day.
Yeah, we're suckers for it, right?
Yeah.
We know nothing's too big's probably going to happen, but you just that chance.
It's just like staring into the sky and watching for a shooting star, man. I'll watch all night long.
That's the first time I've heard that
glimpse.
comparison. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, well, that's about it for us. That'll wrap up our show for today. I hope you enjoyed what you heard from us today. If you did, you can always follow us on Twitter. Our tag, it's so new to me right now that I gotta look it up.
Yeah.
Our tag is, you can find us at the NutriZone Canada. That's at NutriZone CDN. And you can follow us along on Twitter. We like to share our opinions of everything as the days and the games go by. And as the trade deadline gets closer, we'll be posting our opinions more about what we think will be happening with players on the move, and other random thoughts throughout the rest of the season as it heats up towards the playoffs.
Yep.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, and we appreciate you listening to the first one. Hope you liked it. We'll have plenty more coming. We may have one more trade deadline related one if we get to it before the deadline happens. We'll see though.
For sure. So this is Mark and Brad coming at you from the Neutral Zone. Have a good day.
Take care.